Greetings fanboys and fangirls, Jared here with another video from Fanboys Forever. Today we're going to be talking about a new announcement from Mattel, and I thought this was really interesting. Just today, on Mattel's official Masters social media pages, they revealed that they're actually going to be doing something called Masters of the Universe Eternia's Choice. And this is going to represent a very exciting opportunity for the fans so that we can get some voice in the next large-scale item that Mattel offers. I definitely wanted to take this opportunity to discuss a few different aspects of this news. Number one, talking about what the potential choices will be, and also talking about what I think it should be, even if it probably won't happen, as well as probably what will ultimately win. But before we get into it, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we do new Masters reviews and news all the time. And also, don't forget, hit that like button and leave a comment down below letting me know what you think they should go with. With all that out of the way, let's begin. So the announcement says this: fans of Eternia, you have the power to shape the next Masters Universe crowdfund project. Tune in Tuesday, September the 5th to learn how to cast your vote for our next made-to-order large-scale MOTU item. Now, I actually think that this is interesting because, of course, we don't have Eternia in hand yet, but this is definitely becoming, for better or worse, the norm for a lot of these major toy companies, that they're essentially going to be starting on the next crowdfund before the last one even gets completed in production. So I am always a little trepidatious about that, but we've seen Hasbro do the exact same thing with G.I. Joe recently. There's definitely precedent for it, whether for good or bad. But what I am pleased with is how Mattel has went ahead and they basically bucked the trend of just saying, well, here's the next crowdfund, thank you. Instead, they're actually going to give us some form of voice when it comes to what the next one should be. And I think that's probably the smartest thing. That's the only way that something like this is going to be successful. This basically clarifies that this is definitely a large-scale MOTU item. So smaller things probably just won't be a part of the conversation. So we definitely need to focus on vehicles, beasts, and playsets that would be in that larger scale. Let's start by giving a few possible candidates for things we might see. Now, I'm going to assume that Mattel will be giving us just a list of things that are possibilities, and then we vote on those said lists. So I'm basically going to give you my ideas about some things we might end up seeing on the list come next week. One of them, in some configuration or another, will probably be the slime pit. Now, I have heard some folks speculate that maybe the slime pit will be incorporated into the fright zone, because the slime pit is really a fairly small thing. It would be kind of a waste if it was just the slime pit or an expanded slime pit, because it seems small enough to where they could pretty easily do this as, say, something like a retailer exclusive or something like that. So I think that that would be sort of disappointing, but like I said, maybe incorporated as a part of the fright zone. Either way, I know that a lot of people are really nostalgic for the slime pit. It's never been, a huge thing for me, but I think it would be a pretty decent aspect to any crowdfund. But speaking of the fright zone, I think that that's the big one that a lot of people are interested in. I think that a lot of folks would like to see this thing fully realized, and combined with the slime pit, you would have something that would at least be fairly sizable. I'm still not 100% convinced that just these two items together would necessarily qualify as a gigantic MOTU item, so I'm not really sure that that would be the kind of event that, say, an Eternia was, or something like that. As a matter of fact, it would have been a lot more feasible for them to have released the Fright Zone rather than, say, like Snake Mountain recently as an actual retail item. My honest opinion is that probably I usually see crowdfund choices. I usually see those always play it safe. Anytime I've ever seen the fans be able to voice their opinion on any kind of fan vote, seems like they never go for like the crazy options. They're always going for the more traditional member berry option. And I think that that's fine, but I also think that's kind of unexciting. If I had to guess, yeah, it'll probably be some form of the Fright Zone that ends up winning or something, but stick with me because I want to give you some of the more fun options and some of the things that I think the fans should be voting on, because let's be honest, if they didn't even have it as a choice in this crowdfund, they would probably eventually find some sort of way to do a Fright Zone and Slime Pit. That's why I think these fan votes are always more apt to be useful for something that we would probably never get any other way. Now, here's a fun one that I think about, but again, I would be kind of hesitant about it actually being large enough to qualify as an event item, is the Dragon Walker. I think really the thing that makes me interested in it as a crowdfund item would be that the Dragon Walker is so electronic and definitely so interesting when it comes to the way that it actually works and its action feature. It's the kind of thing to where it might need to be a crowdfund just because of how technical it would be to get it to do what it needs to do. And of course, you could always expand something like this and make it a little bit larger. So I actually think this would be really cool, but it would definitely need to have the mechanized feature. Now, there's a lot of concern if that would be enough on its own, so why not have Spydor in there? And Spydor is kind of like the evil warrior's answer to that, because this too is like a mechanized toy and it walks and all of that. So I think having them in one set would actually be pretty cool and would kind of solve the maybe slightly smaller scale on both, but it would be great to see the size pumped up either way. And especially since these were both really heavily pushed items in the heyday of the line, I also think you would have a lot of nostalgia factoring going on with both. But do I think it could command the same number of backers like a Eternia playset? No, I don't. I think that these, at the end of the day, would just be cool vehicles that people would like to add, and I'm not sure they would have the kind of appeal that giant crowdfunds really need to have. Which leads me to, other vehicle choices, because there's several of them that they haven't done yet, and it's amazing how many they have done, really, when you think about it. But even something like the Bashosaurus, you would have to greatly expand before it would be a big deal, and you would probably have to include in a set of other vehicles. Now here's an idea I am really fond of for this crowdfund. It would be a set of 3 dinosaurs, which are based on the 1987 Preternia kind of line of dinosaur figures. You have the giant Tyrantosaurus, which really could be an incredible vehicle, and this giant T-Rex of Skeletors could really be plussed up in a lot of major ways. I've always thought this was a terrific design, and I do think that it would get people excited, even people outside of the fandom, because we all know dinosaur crowdfunds work out just so well. No, that was a disaster from start to finish. Let's hope Mattel has learned so much from their Jurassic Park crowdfund. Of course, the other dinosaur that it would need to include is Biontops. Biontops is a really cool design, and I've always been really fond of what they did with this, especially the cool texture on the skin. So just having it and Tyrantosaurus would be cool, but there's a third aspect. You'd also need to throw in Turbodactyl, and a lot of these have already shown up on packaging artwork. I think Turbodactyl's shown up just recently. These would also be a cool opportunity to maybe include Hero with these guys, or Eldor, or both or something, and kind of have it be a Preternia set. Now, I'm always going to lean towards like Preternia based things, so it's no surprise that I'm really throwing the dinosaurs out there. Here's one that a lot of people have talked about, and that's the Eternian Giants. Of course, if you're not really familiar with these guys, it was Titus, the heroic giant here, and Megator, the evil giant here. And these guys were kind of meant to be these new giant figures that would really bolster the Preternia stuff with He-Man going back in time and all of that. And they were meant to come out in like 87 or so. But these guys really didn't make it to America and instead launched in foreign markets where MOTU was still doing really well. Here you can see that of course they did their Masters of the Universe Classics versions of these guys, but they were fairly small compared to the Classics figures themselves, and they also had limited articulation. Now I think the sculpts on these guys were brilliant, but I think this crowdfund does give you a unique opportunity to redo them to make them a lot more accurate to their original vintage counterparts. As you can see here, Megator was really a wild looking figure, and the proportions are really crazy. So this gives you an opportunity to do giant versions of both of them, 14, 15 inches tall, and that would be an incredible crowdfund. Of course, these are kind of seen as holy grails among MOTU collectors, so I do think it's possible that these would make a great crowdfund. However, make no mistake that Andre the Giant figure from the WWE Eternia line, that did have some kind of pre-sculpting and some foreshadowing for what an eventual Titus figure might look like. And that figure is just, about an inch or so taller than your regular MOTU figures in the line. This always made me believe that it was really possible that when they do the giants, that they might just be slightly oversized and that would be it. So I'm not counting that out, but there's already some tooling here that exists if they do want to go in that direction. Like I said, I would love to see them just realized as giants with rooted hair and everything. I would actually be okay with that. I still kind of go back to this idea that, hey, maybe they're just going to be slightly larger if they ever get around to them. And let's hope they do. Because honestly, these two Italian giants here are really worthy of a big release and something a little more akin to their actual vintage counterparts rather than the Masters of the Universe Classics versions. And one last shameless plug for pre-Eternia stuff. We have the biggest dinosaur of them all, only ever realized in prototype form. We have the Gigantosaur. Gigantosaur was this, gigantic dinosaur toy that Mattel really tried to push in '87 in their product catalog when they were trying to get buyers for this thing. Unfortunately, according to the guy who designed it in an excellent interview on the Battle Ram blog, nobody was really interested enough to make something this expensive happen. And it's a real shame too, because this thing is huge. Now, if I had my druthers, this would be the item that gets picked for the crowdfund. You can see that it had this spring feature to where it would actually pop up, which was really cool looking. In somewhat of a kind of, grisly scene, He-Man would pop out for like a turret right out of the stomach. And on the side, you even had an entryway for some of the other characters to get inside this dinosaur and pilot it. It's just one of those weird ideas, and I don't know, I just think it's really cool. I think a lot of people would be excited to have this giant dinosaur. So this is definitely something they could look into, and I wouldn't rule it out. I would love to see this. Like I said, if I could have my druthers, this would be what I would want. Here's some fan-produced artwork for what it might have looked like back in the day had it actually gotten a box. Here's some of the excellent concept artwork, and you can see just how large they were planning on this thing being. Here's some more concept artwork for when it was going to be referred to as the Turbosaurus, and it was more robotic in nature and definitely meant to resemble a playset more so than even a vehicle or a beast. And I definitely think they could bring some of this back to it, where there's like a battle station once you remove a panel on the side. Here's some more of that same artwork, and you can see more of that robotic aspect present. And here is the open version. And again, it rearing up on its hind legs with that turret. Now, you may think I'm fairly crazy with these next couple of choices, but I am a huge fan of the New Adventures of He-Man, at least in concept anyway. Sometimes the execution wasn't quite right, but there are aspects of the New Adventures of He-Man toy line that I really do think deserve to be exploited. And one of those aspects is the Starship Eternia. Yes, it's this giant Star Trek looking thing with patriotic colors, and I've always just thought this was a really cool concept for a big ship. Here's some of the art, but this, I think, is really the telltale sign that this would be a great addition to the line. You could rearrange the different sections of this ship into all sorts of different modes. A lot of them, I suppose, were considered like space station modes, and some of them were even up on stilts like this. So it's just a really cool thing, and I think if they could simulate these same sorts of features and maybe even add some more, I think that this would be a brilliant addition to the crowdfund. Plus, you can make this thing very sizable. I definitely think that that would be something that this has in common with the Gigantosaurus, is that it would have that presence that it would need to seem like something impressive that couldn't be done any other way. I mean, imagine this scaled up just a little bit. It would be like a giant tower that you could put all of your Origins figures on. Starship Eternia is definitely a very cool opportunity, and one that I hope that they'll look into, or at least give the choice for, even if it wouldn't do well. For a little bit more New Adventures pizzazz, we have Nordor. Nordor is like the lair of Skeletor and the Space Mutants in the New Adventures, and it's like this giant skull asteroid or rock or whatever, or moon. And when you unfold this thing, the sphere opens up, and on the inside you have the whole command station. But really interestingly, you actually have a little projector, and you can project different images up there on the screen, which in retrospect, wasn't too technically advanced. It was more like a Viewmaster. At the time, I'm sure that was a really cool feature, and one that would be really easy to replicate if they were to offer a bigger, more impressive version of this. And that's the thing. I think Nordor definitely has the ability and the potential to be one of those big crowdfund items, because we're talking about a planetoid here. So you really could make this pretty cool. And here's a shot of the original toy. You can see that a lot of that intricate sculpting is just begging to be brought out and more of a modern kind of sculpt. I very much wish that crowdfunds were a lot more adventurous sometimes, especially when it comes to fan vote stuff. I would really like to see people vote for things that you really wouldn't get any other way, and not just the usual suspects. I think it would be really, really easy to guess at this point that it's just going to be some form of the Fright Zone and the Slime Pit. I mean, color me surprised if that's not like the top choice. But to me, even though those would be good things, and I would be very curious to see what Mattel would do with them, they're just not as exciting to me as some of these other possible candidates. And I didn't even mention all of the great stuff that you really could do. I didn't even add things like, say, all those concept playsets back in the Classics days, where you had like the Snake Men lair where Lady Slither would be and all this other stuff. I actually think those were all really cool too. So I'm always going to lean more towards playsets than I am vehicles, but I always really love vehicles that are also playsets. So there's definitely some crossover there, and I'm really curious to see what our choices are, and maybe even more curious to see what people vote for, even though I have a feeling that people will always just vote for the more traditional and expected choices. Either way, fear it, dread it, run from it. The new Masters of the Universe crowdfund, it's coming, so we might as well brace ourselves. But of course, I want to hear from you down below. Be sure to let me know what you think that the next crowdfund ought to be. Did some of my choices excite you? Were some of the choices just flat out stupid in your opinion? Hey, I'd love to hear all your opinions below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because that really helps us out. And be sure to like the video, and I really appreciate your help. And as always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.